In the mid-19th century, a gripping saga unfolded across the vast landscapes of the American West. A tale etched in history as the Snake War from 1864 to 1868. This was no ordinary conflict. It was an irregular war waged by the United States of America against the elusive Snake Indians, a moniker assigned by settlers to the northern Paiute, Bannock, and the western Shoshone bands residing along the serpentine bends of the Snake River. The battleground sprawled across the rugged states of Oregon, Nevada, and California, as well as the untamed expanses of the Idaho Territory. The toll of this tumultuous struggle was marked by a grim count of 1,762 casualties. Fallen soldiers, wounded warriors, and captives, all bearing witness to the relentless clash between two worlds. The roots of this conflict burrowed deep into the soil of increasing tension between native tribes and settlers encroaching on ancestral lands. A narrative unfolded over several years where explorers passing through were trying to have minimal impact, or maybe massive impact, but the brewing storm actually reached a crescendo in August of 1851. In the warm August of 1851, beneath the expansive skies of Oregon Trail, a tale unfolded that would etch its mark on the rugged landscapes near the confluence of the Raft River and Snake River in present-day Idaho. It was a story of clash and tragedy where the destinies of Thomas Clark, an Englishman with a passion for hunting, and Cho-Cho Ko, or Choo-Choo Ko, a 20-year-old veteran guerrilla fighter from the Shoshone, intersected in a fateful counter. Thomas Clark, having journeyed overland of the Willamette Valley in Oregon in 1848, partnered with fellow adventurer Jackson Vandervert and others in the California Gold Rush. Their gains were reinvested in high-quality cattle and horse destined for Oregon. By the spring of 1851, Clark, accompanied by his family and several Illinois pioneers, embarked on a journey westward. As they traversed the expansive landscapes, their wagon train, laden with dreams and possessions, became a slow-moving entity, allowing the animals to graze and thrive. Clark's family, including his mother, his sister Grace, and brothers, made the pilgrimage with him. Grace, at 25, drove a first-class hack designed for her and Clark, possibly the first of its kind traversing these kind of plains. Meanwhile, Cho-Cho Ko, a seasoned warrior with the Shoshone tribe, found himself in a challenging situation. Short on supplies, particularly good horses, guns, and ammunition, Cho-Cho Ko journeyed eastward along the Oregon Trail to meet his uncle Deerfly, seeking reinforcements. On Wednesday of August 6th of 1851, the wheels of destiny turned. The wagon train halted by the Raft River for a noonday rest. Miss Clark, Grace, and Hodgson, a 17-year-old brother, drove ahead to prepare lunch. Thomas Clark, with hunting on his mind, meandered up the river in pursuit of ducks. Little did they know the shadows of adversity were gathering. The attackers under Cho-Cho Ko's leadership devised a cunning strategy. Some warriors charged the main body of the wagon train at full gallop, inducing chaos, while others, including Cho-Cho Ko, set their sights on the prized possessions, the horses. Amid the unfolding drama, Hodgkin Clark, eager to defend, climbed a wagon wheel but fell victim to a fatal shot. Miss Clark, confronted by a Shoshone man, resisted only to face gunfire. Grace shielded her mother and was wounded in the wrist, the pain echoing through both of their lives. In the chaos, Grace, wounded and feigning death, witnessed the warrior's actions. Her clothes were torn and her body scarred. She escaped further harm as a dust cloud heralded the return of Thomas Clark with his hunting hounds. Thomas Clark, rushing back at full speed, spurred the warriors into desperate act. Mistaking him for a vanguard of a larger party, they threw Grace down a bluff, leaving her with physical and emotional scars that she would endure for the rest of her life. The main body of the wagon train stood paralyzed, their initial shock preventing swift action. Charles Clark, Thomas's brother, organized a pursuit, but Cho-Cho Ko's band found refuge in a natural fortress, evading capture. Some stolen horses would later resurface in Salt Lake City, weaving a thread of suspicion around the involvement of the raiders. When word of the Clark massacre reached the masses, a series of retaliations begun, specifically and most notably, a retaliation by a man named Ben Wright, when he organized a coalition of miners to respond to that attack. His group marched on a Modoc village near Black Bluff in Oregon and killed 41 native Modocs. Similar acts of violence and retribution paved the way for the impending Snake War, in a conflict that hung like a dark cloud over the horizon. In August of 1854, the Snake River had become a theater of tragedy as native attacks on pioneer trains reached its climax. The Ward Massacre, 21 people killed abruptly. Because of that, and the attacks on the Modoc Village and the Clark Massacre, the U.S. Army launched the punitive Awareness Expedition, and it made a turning point of the relentless struggle for dominance. As the years unfurled, echoes of the Spokane War resonated, and the U.S. Army became the custodian of migration to Oregon. Escorts like silent guards were dispatched each spring from 1858. Yet, the relentless tension persisted, especially for straggling groups like the ill-fated Myers Party, meeting their demise in the Salmon Falls Massacre of 1860, and that actually claimed 29 lives. As federal troops withdrew in 1861 to confront the upheavals of the American Civil War, the torch was passed to the California Volunteers. Subsequently, the 1st Washington Territory Infantry Regiment and the 1st Oregon Cavalry replaced Army exports on the immigration trails, a shifting of the guard against the ever-encroaching shadows of conflict. Amidst the turmoil, a visual journey reveals the Nez Perce Reservation in Idaho, a testament to the geographical chessboard where tribes and settlers played their moves. The landscape echoed the silent resistance of Western Shoshone, Paiute, and other local Indians against the relentless encroachment, a resistance that would soon be known as the Snake War. Yet, the tendrils of conflict extended beyond territorial disputes. As gold mining waned in California in the late 1850s, a new wave of prospectors sought their fortunes venturing north and eastward up into the upper Great Basin and the Snake River Valley. A desperate competition for resources ensued, fueling violent bloodshed on both sides as miners consumed more game and water, and that dug into the Native American lands. In the fall of 1862, a series of gripping events unfolded, setting the stage for a fateful clash between Bear Hunter and Colonel Connor. This saga emerged against the backdrop against sweeping struggles between indigenous peoples and the American settlers that echoed across the vast expanse of the American west of the Mississippi. We've kind of been building up to this point here, so you're seeing the causes of these battles, why people are fighting, and now we're getting into sparking the war. So while the nation's gaze remained fixed on the eastern states embroiled in the Civil War, these incidents unfolded near the boundary of Washington and Utah territories, adding to the complexity of the country. In the shadow of these broader conflicts, a narrative unfolded in this region near Summit Creek, which is now Smithville, when a horse mysteriously vanished, sparking an accusation against a young Shoshone named Pugweenie. The subsequent trial and hanging of this man set off a chain reaction as the Shoshone retaliated, claiming lives of settlers in the Merrill family. Meanwhile, the echoes of the gruesome massacre near Fort Hall in 1859 resonated through the region. A settler company from Michigan, journeying along the Oregon Trail, fell prey at night by presumed local Shoshone. The survivors, hiding along the Portneuf River, bore witness to the brutal aftermath, with Lieutenant Livingston's dragoons encountering a scene of unimaginable horror. A young girl mutilated and left to walk on her stumps, symbolizing the depths of the tragedy. Fast forward to 1860, and the Oregon Trail had become a battlefield in the infamous Battle of the Providence. Elijah Utter and his migrant party faced a deadly assault by Bannock and Boise Shoshone, resulting in a significant loss of life. Reuben Van Ornum, a missing young boy, became the focal point of a quest for justice. His uncle, Zacchaeus Van Ornum, sought assistance from Colonel Connor at Fort Douglas, triggering a dramatic expedition to Cache Valley. The confrontation with Chief Bear Hunter and the subsequent skirmish in the Providence Canyon underscored the tensions that would come to head. As the winter of 1862 approached, Connor dispatched Major Edward McGarry on an expedition to recover stolen livestock, further escalating hostilities. The Bear River crossing witnessed a dramatic episode when the Shoshone breaking camp, fleeing and advancing Army troops, and executing captives. The Deseret News expressed concern about the potential fallout from the executions, highlighting a delicate balance between settlers and Shoshone. The Montana Trail became another theater of conflict when Shoshone warriors seeking vengeance for past actions. A series of attacks on miners culminated in a final catalyst from Connor's expedition, a Shoshone assault on a group of 8 miners near Franklin. As the survivors reached Salt Lake City, Chief Justice John F. Kinney, not Kennedy, Kinney, issued warrants to arrest Shoshone chiefs, setting the stage for a military response. As soldiers from Fort Douglas prepared for a formidable expedition northward to confront the Shoshone, Colonel Connor had designed a plan. Keen on a surprise assault, he divided his command into detachments, ensuring that they met at strategic intervals during their journey at the Cache Valley. The response to Connor's military campaign echoed across diverse sentiments. George A. Smith, chronicling in the journal History of the LDS Church, hinted at skepticism, fearing the expedition might result in catching friendly Indians, leaving the guilty untouched. On the contrary, the Deseret News, in an editorial, expressed hope for the eradication of hostile parties, applauding Connor's potential success. The initial departure from Fort Douglas witnessed the first group, led by Captain Samuel W. Hoyt, departing on January 22nd of 1863. Following closely was a second group, consisting of 220 cavalry personnel, led by Colonel Connor himself, setting out on January 25th. Armed with a substantial ammunition stockpile and aided by the cover of darkness, the soldiers embarked on a journey shrouded in secrecy. Upon nearing the town of Franklin, Captain Hoyt's infantry encountered a moment when Shoshone sought sustenance from settlers. Say that 3 times. Shoshone sought sustenance from settlers. The soldiers' unexpected arrival prompted a swift retreat by the Shoshone, leaving sacks of grain behind. This encounter set the stage for the impending conflict. Connor orchestrated the convergence of his forces, aiming for a surprise dawn attack on January 29th. The cold Utah winter added a layer of adversity, with whiskey rations freezing solid and soldiers grappling with frostbite. The Shoshone, meanwhile, gathering food from Mormon settlers, aware of the looming confrontation but anticipating a negotiation rather than direct military engagement. The morning of the 29th unfurled a brutal confrontation, marking one of the coldest times in the Cache Valley. Connor's initial frontal assault faced fierce resistance, leading to a temporary retreat. Subsequent flanking maneuvers and a relentless offensive forced the Shoshone into a dire situation where they actually ran out of ammunition. As the battle unfolded, Chief Sadwich, sensing the impending clash, observed, quote, "Maybe that's them soldiers they were talking about." The Shoshone chiefs, anticipating negotiation, were taken aback by the ferocity of the attack. The battlefield witnessed a tragic chapter, with Bear Hunter, a prominent chief that we talked about at the beginning, meeting his end. The aftermath revealed a stark disparity in casualty counts, with the California Volunteers sustaining losses and the Shoshone enduring a devastating toll. Survivors, including Chief Sadwich, navigated the harsh reality of the aftermath, striving to rebuild his shattered community. The echoes of the Bear River Massacre resonated as the concluding chapter of the Shoshone Nation's significant influence on the Cache Valley and its realms. Beyond the immediate ramifications, the conflict unfolded as a pivotal moment, facilitating the expansion of Mormon settlements into the northern reaches of Cache Valley and becoming a springboard for further ventures into southeastern Idaho. Cache Valley, once the contested terrain, now bore witness to the unfolding of a new chapter in its history. The friction between the Mormons and Colonel Connor persisted, weaving a narrative of accusations and criticisms that reverberated for years. Allegations of harassment against non-Mormons in the Utah Territory and Connor's ambitious endeavors to initiate a mining industry in Utah fueled an ongoing discord. In the aftermath, Chief Sedgwick and his band forged an alliance with the Mormons, a surprising turn of events that saw many members baptized and embracing the teachings of the LDS Church. Sedgwick, elevated to the status of an elder in priesthood, played a central role in the establishment of the Washakie or Washakie, Utah, a town named in honor of the Shoshone chief. The Northwestern Band members, under the sponsorship of the LDS Church, embarked on the journey of building farms and homesteads, paving the way for their integration into mainstream LDS society. Those Shoshone who did not partake in the settlement found their way to the Fort Hall Indian Reservation or the Wind River Indian Reservation, charting distinct paths in the aftermath of conflict. Meanwhile, the arrival of Colonel Connor and the California volunteers at Fort Douglas and their reception in the California community portrayed them as heroes. Published newspaper articles celebrated their exploits, depicting Connor's promotion to the permanent rank of Brigadier General. Shortly thereafter, he received a brevet promotion to the rank of Major General, an accolade that underscored his leadership during the Bear River Massacre. Connor's campaign against the Native Americans persisted through the remainder of the U.S. Civil War, leading the Powder River expedition against the Sioux and Cheyenne, etching his name further into the history of Western conflict. The legacy of the Bear River Massacre, with its complex interplay of alliances, settlements, and social integrations, left a mark on the Cache Valley history. So what comes next? How does it end? The stage is set in 1866, amidst the turbulent currents of the Snake River War, for a defining moment, which is the Battle of the Owyhee River. Earlier that year, the Owyhee River had borne witness to relentless assaults by the Paiute, setting the scene for a clash that would resonate through the history of the Cache Valley. At first light of December 26, General Crook's forces stealthily closed in on an unsuspecting Paiute camp. The element of surprise played its hand as the initial shot shattered the stillness of the morning. Chief Howluck, undeterred, chose defiance and met the soldiers in battle. Taunts from the indigenous warriors were met with a precision and force that left little room for mockery. The swift exchange of gunfire saw the mounted warriors swiftly incapacitated, with the remaining few seeking refuge behind rocky fortifications until noon. When a tactical withdrawal was the only recourse, the toll on Howluck's warriors was severe. 30 lay lifeless and 7 were taken captive. In contrast, Crook's forces incurred a toll of 1 wounded and another mortally wounded. The battle, as noted by Crook, decisively put an end to further attacks from that particular band. So the Snake War unfolded through peace talks between General Crook and Snake Chief Wawewa. Despite the profound impact, the Snake War languished in relative obscurity within the pages of United States history. The Paiute and Western Shoshone, lacking their martial renown of like the Apache or Comanche, failed to capture the attention of reporters during the conflict. Joe Wasson emerged as one of the few to document the war, but the nation, gripped by the American Civil War and its aftermath, remained kind of largely oblivious. Yet, despite its overshadowed status, the Snake War held a somber distinction. Statistically, it stood as the deadliest of the Indian wars in the West, deadlier than the Battle of Little Bighorn, leaving a total of 1,762 men killed, wounded, and captured on both sides. If you look at the Battle of Little Bighorn, who everybody on this channel has probably heard of, and people who don't even care about Wild West history have probably heard of, that battle, there was only 847 casualties as compared to the Snake War, which was 1,762. The Snake War is obscure. I didn't know about it until I started researching, and I thought I was pretty well read on the events of the Wild West. But it does leave a mark on the Wild West, even though we don't see it. It allows more travel to the west, which connects the eastern part of the United States to the western part of the United States, and all the drama that unfolded in between. I've been wanting to remake this video for a while now. One of the most popular videos on this channel was the oldest recorded video of Native American tribes. So, but there was no context to it. I just put it on the channel, and it did well. But I wanted to make another video and actually have some background to why these dances were done, who they were, and what tribe it was. So we'll start with actually the first one of the two, because they actually are related. So the Buffalo Dance, this first one is called the Buffalo Dance or the Bison Dance, is a yearly dance celebration for many Native American Plains tribes. The Cheyenne, the Pawnee, the Omaha, and specifically here, the Sioux. So this festival typically happens when buffalo herds return and includes a big feast and a dance where like some of the men would wear buffalo and other animal skins. And they did this because the buffalo and bison were very crucial parts to their society, and they had to make sure they did everything they could to have the herd return to provide enough food and resources. So this first video was shot in 1894. It's a 16-second. I'm going to have it on repeat. But the original 16 seconds, it's in black and white and silent film because we're still in the silent film era. And it's called the Buffalo Dance and it shows people doing their traditional dances. And it's known as the earliest film that we know of Native American tribes. And the Buffalo Dance isn't just a standalone festival. It can be part of bigger ceremonies like the Sun Dance. In some communities, it's even like a dance linked to healing, where they call on the spirit of the buffalo to actually cure the sick. So the next video, and I'm putting them together because they are related. So this first video was shot September 24th of 1894, and it was shot at Edison's Black Maria studio in West Orange, New Jersey. But per film historian C. Musser, who is an Edison film historian, this footage was actually shot the same day. The Buffalo Dance was actually shot the same day as this next film, which is the Ghost Dance. And they came to the studio, then the Sioux put their full regalia on, and then they did these traditional dances on film. So I haven't found anything about why they did that. Could be for awareness of, bringing information of what the tribes were. Could be for like the Ghost Dance, which I'm about to go over, was done for Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, so it could be advertising. But they came into an actual studio, so when it looks like it's not out in the wild, it isn't. And I've posted this video and pictures in the past where people have made comments saying, oh, their color looks off, and this looks like this other way. This is the earliest, some of the earliest film we have. It's not, shot in any modern technology. We're still, a long way away from, actual movies. So, it shot in 1894 and then being restored and kept preserved till now. There's going to be some like wear down of the film. So it's not some different, it's Sioux people showing their traditional dances. So to go into the Buffalo Dance, the Ghost Dance, the second video. So they talked about these native peoples as show Indians, and they're mainly actors from the Plains nations like the Lakota, the Dakota, the Nakona, known as what the Sioux people are. And it took place in the Wild West shows, not just Buffalo Bills, but there was a lot of Wild West shows going on right now. They wanted to show people on the East Coast back, in St. Louis and Philadelphia. They wanted to show them what was happening out in the Wild West, places where they couldn't. They just hear stories. So they would literally bring shows of like Custer's Last Stand. They'd bring that to them and show them this is what happened in real time, and they'd use these show Indians to represent them. So they were usually hired to be like staged Indian races, and supposed historical battles often portrayed like savagery and wildness in attack scenes against white people. These shows generally depicted native people as exotic savages engaging in bizarre rites and cruel violence. Native women were dressed in like pretty expletive, non-traditional clothes like men's headdresses and breastplates, combined with like pretty skimpy attire, like especially for the time, like leather shorts, which wouldn't be worn in their reality. And this is where they performed the Sioux ghost dance. So again, it was shot the same day as the Buffalo Dance in the same studio, same day, same everything. So that's why it kind of it kind of looks the same, because it was the same day. But some other people who showed up to these Wild West shows, specifically like Buffalo Bill and like Cody's Wild West show, Chief Sitting Bull, one of the most famous chiefs, was one of the star attractions alongside Annie Oakley. During his time with the show, Sitting Bull met President Grover Cleveland, which he believed highlighted his importance as a chief. And he gave a cherished horse to him when he left the show, and he was friends with Buffalo Bill. Another native chief, Red Eagle, underwent 3-year training period at Cody's base in North Platte, Nebraska. And during that time, he developed skills in steer roping, lariat tricks, like rope tricks, and the art of maintaining pretty much a firm grip on anything with 4 legs. And he debuted at 13, portrayed like a Pony Express rider. And a year later, the show actually toured Europe, and over several years, Red Eagle became like a crucial member of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, captivating like audiences through his journey. Other famous Native American names that pop up in these Wild West shows, Red Cloud, like we just talked about, Chief Joseph, Geronimo, and the Modoc War Scout, a man named Donald McKay. The most important lesson I learned from those proficient gunfighters was the winner of a gunplay usually was the man who took his time. The second was that if I hoped to live long on the frontier, I would shun flashy trick shooting, grandstand play, as I would poison. I was a fair hand with pistol, rifle, or shotgun, but I learned more about gunfighting from Tom Spear's cronies during the summer of '71 than I had dreamed was in the book. Those old-timers took their gunplay seriously, which was a natural under the conditions in which they lived. Shooting, to them, was considerably more than aiming at a mark and pulling a trigger. Models of weapons, methods of wearing them, means of getting them into action and operating them, all to the one end of combining high speed with absolute accuracy, contributed to the frontiersman's shooting skill. The sought-after degree of proficiency was that which could turn to most effective account the split second between life and death. Hours upon hours of practice and wide experience and actualities supported their arguments over style. When I say that I learned to take my time in a gunfight, I do not wish to be misunderstood, for the time to be taken was only that split fraction of a second that means the difference between deadly accuracy with a 6-gun and a miss. It is hard to make this clear to a man who has never been in a gunfight. Perhaps I can best describe such time-taking as going into action with the greatest speed of which a man's muscles are capable, but mentally unflustered by an urge to hurry, or the need for complicated nervous and muscular actions which trick shooting involves. Mentally deliberate but muscularly faster than thought is what I mean. In all my life as a frontier police officer, I did not know a really proficient gunfighter who had anything but contempt for the gun fanner or the man who literally shot from the hip. In later years, I read a great deal about this type of gunplay, supposedly employed by men noted for skill with a .45. From personal experience and numerous 6-gun battles which I witnessed, I can only support the opinion advanced by the men who gave me my most valuable instruction in fast and accurate shooting, which was that the gun fanner and hip shooter stood small chance to live against a man who, as old Jack Gallagher had always put it, took his time and pulled the trigger once.
Cocking and firing mechanisms on new revolvers were almost invariably altered by the purchasers in their interests of smoother, effortless handling, usually by filing the dog which controlled the hammer. Some going so far as to remove triggers entirely or lash them against the guard, in which cases the guns were fired by thumbing the hammer. This is not to be confused with fanning, in which the triggerless gun is held in one hand while the other was brushed rapidly across the hammer to cock the gun, and firing it by the weight of the hammer itself. A skillful gun fanner could fire 5 shots from a .45 so rapidly that the individual reports were indistinguishable, but what could happen to him in a gunfight was pretty close to murder. I saw Jack Gallagher's theory borne out so many times in deadly operations that I was never tempted to forsake the principles of gunfighting, as I had them from him and his associates. There was no man in the Kansas City group who was Wild Bill's equal with a 6-gun. Bill's correct name, by the way, was James B. Hickok. Legend and the imaginations of certain people have exaggerated the number of men he killed in gunfights and have misrepresented the manner in which he did his killing. At that, they could not very well overdo his skill with pistols. Hickok knew all the fancy tricks and was as good as the best at that sort of gunplay. But when he had serious business at hand, a man to get, the acid test of marksmanship, I doubt if he employed them. At least, he told me that he did not. I've seen him in action, and I never saw him fan a gun, shoot from the hip, or try to fire 2 pistols simultaneously. Neither have I ever heard a reliable old-timer tell of any trick shooting employed by Hickok when fast, straight shooting meant life or death. The 2-gun business is another matter that can stand some truth before the last of the old-time gunfighters is gone. They wore 2 guns, most of the 6-gun toters did, and when the time came for action went after them with both hands. But they did not shoot them that way. Primarily, 2 guns made the threat of something in reserve. They were useful as a display of force when a lone man stacked up against a crowd. Some men could shoot equally well with either hand, and in a gunplay might alternate their fire. Others exhausted the loads from their gun on the right or the left, as the case might be, then shifted the reserve weapon to the natural shooting hand if that was necessary and possible. Such a move, the border shift, could be made faster than the eye could follow a top-notch gun thrower, but if the man was good as that, the shift would seldom be required. Whenever you see a picture of some 2-gun man in action with both weapons held closely against the hips and both spitting smoke together, you can put it down that you are looking at a picture of a fool or a fake. I remember quite a few of these so-called 2-gunmen who tried to operate everything at once, but like fanners, they did not last long in proficient company. In the days of which I am talking, among men whom I have in mind, when a man went after his guns, he did so with a single serious purpose. There was no such thing as a bluff. When a gunfighter reached for his .45, every faculty he owned was keyed to shooting as speedily and as accurately as possible, to making his first shot the last of the fight. He just had to think of his gun solely as something with which to kill another before he himself could be killed. The possibility of intimidating an antagonist was remote, although the drop was thoroughly respected and few men in the West could draw against it. I've seen men so fast and so sure of themselves that they did go after their guns while their men who intended to kill them had them covered, and what is more when out in the play. They were rare. It is safe to say, for all general purposes, that anything in gunfighting that smacked of show-off or bluff was left to braggarts who were ignorant or careless of their lives. I might add that I never knew a man who amounted to anything to notch his gun with credits, as they were called, for men he had killed. Outlaws, gunmen of this wild crew who killed for the sake of brag, followed this custom. I have worked with most of the noted peace officers: Hickok, Billy Tillman, Pat Shug, Bat Masterson, Charlie Bassett, and others of like caliber, have handled their weapons many times, but never knew one of them to carry a notched gun. There are two other points about the old-time method of using 6 guns, most effectively, that do not seem to be generally known about. One is that the gun was not cocked with the ball of the thumb. As his gun was jerked into action, the old-timer closed the whole joint of his thumb over the hammer, and the gun cocked in that fashion. The soft flesh of the thumb ball might slip if the man's hands were moist, and a slip was not to be chanced if humanly avoidable. This thumb joint method was employed whether or not a man used the trigger for firing. On the second point, I have often been asked why 5 shots without reloading were all a top-notch gunfighter fired when his guns were chambered for 6 cartridges. The answer is merely safety. To ensure against accidental discharge of the gun while in the holster due to hair trigger adjustments, the hammer rested upon the empty chamber. As widely as this was known and practiced, the number of cartridges a man carried in a 6-gun may be taken as an indication of a man's rank with the gunfighters of the old school. Practiced gun wielders had too much respect for their weapons to take unnecessary chances with them. It was only with tyros and would-bes that you heard of accidental discharges or didn't know it was loaded injuries in the country, where carrying a Colt was a man's prerogative.